Thank you so very much for choosing to be with us this evening. I've been watching as you signed in, and I know some of you, but many I do not know. So I begin by introducing myself and our organization. I'm Reverend Joan Sabatino, Director of UUJusticePA, formerly known as for the last decade as UU Plan. Now our name says who we are, what we do, and where we do it. We are Unitarian Universalists working for justice in Pennsylvania. Unitarian Universalists, lovingly known as UUs, is a liberal faith tradition grounded in justice. Justice is in our history. Justice lives within the principles we live by. Let's see, it looks like right now there are 129 people on the call with 5 sitting in the waiting room. So that's a significant number of people for a program that we would put on. I'm sure that is because of Tom Ulrich's winning personality, but I suggest January 6th woke folks up. And if we are not aware or concerned about democracy previously, we are now. UUJusticePA has several justice issues we are all coming to understand if we don't stop the downfall and fix, repair, reclaim the democracy we want, our future is doomed. I'll be here on the call tonight, sometimes with the video off to allow for my dog lady to bark and other interruptions that happen on a city street in downtown Harrisburg. But I'll be watching the chat. I'll answer your questions as we go when I can, but I'll be back live with video on at the end of the program, hopefully with 10 or 15 minutes beforehand, and we'll spend the last few minutes answering your questions. May your mind tonight be opened, enhanced, and your heart be healed. Enjoy.
So Joan, before you go,
Put your question in the chat if you need to. Randall, can you unmute Tom?
I believe, got it. All right, so Joan, is Khalif on the call? Check that out. So, well, welcome everybody. Reverend Joan, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I believe.
Tom, excuse me, Tom. Khalif is on the call.
Okay, so everybody's here.
Yeah.
So as we get started tonight, I believe we all can agree that 2021 is an important year for the democracy we want in Pennsylvania and across the nation. I believe we are all interested in reforming our dysfunctional political system in Pennsylvania and across the nation, so we have a representative democracy with economic, environmental, and social justice for all. And to achieve that, it's important that we have a strong collective voice speaking up in support of a healthy democracy. And so it's important also that we have a vision of what that democracy would and should look like, and what reforms are necessary. To that end, we have invited 4 leaders representing 5 organizations in Pennsylvania that have been active in the democracy movement, and we asked them to discuss what is happening, what should be happening in Harrisburg, and how we can support their efforts. So we're really happy to welcome Carol Kunihulm, who is the Director of Fair Districts and spokesperson for the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania. Khalif Ali is the Executive Director of Common Cause of Pennsylvania. Kadida Kenner is the Director of Campaigns for the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. And Rabbi Michael Pollack is the Director of MarchOnHarrisburg. So we have a distinguished panel tonight, and we welcome you all, and we welcome everybody joining our call tonight. I want to remind you that we will be posting the information from this presentation, and the video for the entire program will be on the UU Justice website and on the Good Government PA website. So welcome, everybody. As a keynote, I like to start our program with three short videos speaking to the state of democracy nationwide. So we have one featuring Tim Snyder, the author of On Tyranny, another one with Heather McGee from The Color of Change, and one with Francis Moore Lappé, who is the author of The Diet for a Small Planet and co-author of Daring Democracy with our friend Adam Eichen. And so we'd like to watch those and then ask each panelist for 2 or 3 minutes on their perspective on the national issue and democracy in general. So Randall, if you're ready, please show those videos.
So starting with the objective part, with the facts, the United States is a country which is among the least equal in the world. According to Credit Suisse, which is a Swiss bank and not some kind of crazy left-wing organization, we are second in the world in wealth inequality after the Russian Federation. In the United States, since the 1980s, basically 90% of the American population has seen no improvement in either wealth or income. Almost all of the improvement in wealth and income has been in the top 10%, and most of that's been in the top 1%, and most of that has been in the top 0.1%, and most of that has been in the top 0.01%, which means that not only are people not moving forward objectively, but the way they experience the world, and this is very powerful, is that other people are on top. So if you and I have the same thing over the course of 30 years, but we watch as our neighbor suddenly has 20 times as much, we're not going to say, oh, everything's fine because we have the same. We're going to say, gosh, our neighbor has more than we do and has so much more than we do, he could probably reach in and take everything we have away, which is, of course, true. And that's the condition that people call oligarchy. So the politics of inevitability says the market has to lead to democracy, and therefore there's no reason to correct for what the market does. If you don't correct for what the market does, if you don't support trade unions, if you don't build up some kind of a welfare state, if you don't support public education and so on, then you're going to have a situation where citizens spread apart in wealth and spread apart in income, which is what's happening. And that in turn may be the most powerful way that the politics of inevitability breaks into the politics of eternity. Because if there is massive inequality of wealth and income, individuals and families no longer think, I've got a bright future. They no longer believe, and this is something Mr. Trump got right, even if he has no solution and he's making things worse on purpose, they no longer believe in the American dream. And they're correct not to do so. If you were born in 1940, your chances of doing better than your parents were about 90%. If you're born in 1980, your chances are about 1 in 2, and it keeps going down. So wealth inequality means the lack of social advance, means a totally different horizon. It means that you see life in a completely different way. You stop thinking time is an arrow which is moving forward to something better, and you start thinking, maybe the good old days were better. Maybe we have to make America great again. And you get caught in these nostalgic loops. You start thinking, it can't be my fault that I'm not doing better. So whose fault is it? And then the clever politicians, instead of providing policy for you, provide enemies for you. They provide language for you with which you can explain why you're not doing so well. They blame the other, whether it's the Chinese or the Muslims or the Jews or the blacks or the immigrants. And that allows you to think, okay, time is a cycle. Things used to be better, but other people have come and they've taken things away from me. That's how the politics of inevitability becomes the politics of eternity. Wealth inequality, income inequality are one of the major channels by which that happens. So one of the fundamental problems with our American right-wing politics of inevitability is that it generates income and wealth inequality, and it explains away income and wealth inequality. And so you get this cycle where objectively people are less and less well off, And subjectively, we keep telling ourselves this is somehow okay because in the grand scheme of things, this is somehow necessary, when it's not.
What if I told you that the solution to economic inequality isn't economic policy, it's tackling racism?
A lot of progressives think that if we talk about race, that will end up dividing us. But the hard truth is, we're already divided. And we're divided because there's constant race talk in our society by conservatives. It's just that they're not talking about race expressly, they're using dog whistles. Think about a term like illegal alien,
Makers and takers,
welfare queen,
entitlements,
freeloaders,
people who just want free stuff,
inner city crime.
drug testing for welfare recipients.
What color faces do you associate with those terms? Or think about terms like the silent majority, the heartland, real Americans, hardworking taxpayers. What color faces do you see with those terms? Lyndon Johnson in 1964 is the last Democrat to win a majority of the white vote, and he won in a landslide, campaigning on the promise to end poverty in a generation. And yet, at the same time, racial anxiety is rising in the South because of the civil rights movement. Conservatives sense that they can use racial appeals as a way to win votes. And just 8 years later, Richard Nixon wins in an even bigger landslide, dog whistling about law and order and the silent majority.
And then Ronald Reagan brings it home.
You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger, that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger, nigger.
He's able to convince many Americans to actually side with the preferences of the 1% by making fear of people of color tied to our very idea of government.
I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
And if government is the problem, Reagan said, then trust the marketplace. And easy as 1, 2, 3. You have the policies that have created massive wealth inequality, all sold to the American public through a narrative of racial resentment.
Racism is the belief in a hierarchy of human value, that some people are just worth more than others. And that doesn't just affect the people who are seen as worthless, because in a country where our fates are linked, as long as we believe in a hierarchy of human value, some of us will always end up on the bottom.
Everything progressives want, reining in Wall Street, building a new infrastructure, cleaning up the environment, free college, everything progressives want depends on us having government on our side. And it's exactly race that leads us to fight against each other, that leads us to distrust each other and to resent government, and in turn to give control over government to the very rich.
Some progressives right now think that if we solve the problems of economic inequality, racial disparities and racism will go away. I think it's actually the opposite. We can't solve economic inequality and change the politics of our country without addressing racism.
I'm here to begin our new Thought Spark series, and it is on the theme of democracy. Let me start with a sobering observation, and that is that trust in democracy is tumbling in America. In 1995, 1 in 16 of us said that military rule, yeah, looks pretty good. But by 2014, that share had grown to 1 in 6. So I think it is time that more and more of us spread the word that democracy is not an option among other choices. It is the only pathway toward human thriving. For even beyond the physical, yeah, we need food and shelter and water, but beyond the physical, what do humans really need? First, we need to know that we have agency, that we have a voice, we have power. It is what philosopher Erich Fromm called our need to make a dent. And now they're even discovering that in babies, you see joy in realizing that your actions have an impact. So autocratic governments say, no, 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 we don't need you. We will make the decisions. Only democracy nourishes that and meets that need of ours to make a difference. 2, we need to know that we have meaning and purpose in our lives that we create, not that somebody tells us from above, but what we create together in communities that we form. That brings me to the 3rd deep human need that only democracies can nourish. And that is our need for connection with one another, people that we choose to converse with, to create our future together with. Only democracy can encourage that, even communities that challenge and that work to improve the democracy. Here is the great news as well, that Journey for Democracy can meet these needs. So it's both the form of governance and the journey to get there that our need for power, meaning, and connection is met. So I'm going to drop any notion of democracy as some dull duty. It's not a you should, it's a we can. It is not the dull spinach that we have to somehow stomach to get our, those yummy desserts, our personal freedoms. No, democracy is itself full of enormous rewards for each of us. That is what I'm learning in the democracy movement. So when we think about it, power, meaning, and connection, what do those add up to? For me, they add up to human dignity. So in a sense, democracy equals dignity. So it doesn't surprise me at all that 8 of the 10 countries ranked highest in electoral integrity, that is democracy, also are the world's happiest. So democracy is dignity, essential to our happiness. So I'll say it again. Democracy is not an option among others. It is the only pathway enabling us to create the world that virtually all of us want. A world of human thriving in which dignity is at the core. Thank you.
The idea now is to have each panelist take 2 or 3 minutes and react to what was in those videos. And since you're on the screen first, Kadida, why don't you go first?
Talk about being here tonight. All right. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. My reactions to those 3 videos. Heather McGhee is one of my favorite people on the planet. Unfortunately, a lot of us probably didn't get to see her talk, actually, her lips moving as she was talking in that video. But yes, we're here tonight to talk about democracy. And I think that we all kind of have this abstract feeling about what democracy is, but we know that we love it. And then we know that we need it and we need to have it here in the United States of America. So my initial reactions to all 3 videos is just that, we've gone through so much here in a country where democracy has not always been achieved. And we're still working for a higher purpose of our democracy. But my initial takes is, always happy to see folks talk about democracy in a way that's inclusive. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Carol, can Randall or whoever, can we get Carol up on the screen?
Yeah, I'll just start talking and you'll see.
There you are. Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for hosting this. Thank you for those really terrific videos. I think tying them together, they really do connect in the incredible importance of economic equality, racial equality, and creating a system where everybody has an opportunity to have human agency, I think is incredibly important. And I think Pennsylvania has lagged many of our other states. The US has lagged many other countries. And I think it's a shame. But I do think that as we encourage people to take agency, to explore power, then we see democracy kind of reviving itself. And I think we're in that space. I think the horror of the past year or so, the sadness of the past several years, but really the last year has been an incredibly sad and difficult year for so many of us. And I think in that space, we have seen that we have to own our future together, and we have to, not just the people close to us, but the people farther from us, and keep kind of building broader and broader coalitions of agency together, sharing what we know, sharing what we can do, connecting together to say we all need to be heard. To me, that's really powerful. And I thought those videos did a really great job of expressing that.
Thank you very much. Khalif. Can we get Khalif's?
Yes. Hey, how's it going?
Welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Wow, so those videos were great. So what they tell me is that democracy is the answer, but we're not quite there yet. You know, when they, I think the last speaker mentioned something that really stuck with me is democracy is dignity. And that's not dignity for a specific group of individuals, class of individuals, race of individuals. It's dignity for everyone. And I think one of the reasons why these conversations are so important is because we're all looking for answers within democracy that help everyone or that works for everyone. And I think that, you know, through these continued conversations and through a better understanding of our own concept of democracy, I think that's important. You know, I think when we think about democracy, we don't necessarily think about a specific definition. We kind of think about what are our values, what do we see that's important about democracy, and this is beyond government by the people, for the people. You know, this is about our values and how our values tend to establish these pillars of democracy that we use and we apply in our daily life and when we go through life. You know, but the important part about our own individual pillars for democracy is whether or not they are universal in the sense of applying to everyone within this country. And what we're seeing is people are establishing their own pillars of democracy that don't really apply to everyone, but instead to their own specific group. So in understanding that there's dignity that is implicit in democracy for everyone, you know, I think we need to have, you know, this expanded conversation. These forums are great, but we have to continue to expand these conversations to include a number of individuals and groups, some of which we may not like personally, but all of which we need to have conversations with. So I'll just leave it there for now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Rabbi Michael Pollack, are you there?
Hello. So the videos. The videos tonight, they really touched on how divide and conquer propaganda is used to keep us divided and to plunder our people and our land. We are intentionally divided from artificial creations on top, you know, by race, by geography, by religion, by gender, by anything and everything that can be used to keep us from coming together and realizing that we're getting pickpocketed from Wall Street firms, from people who are just in a different income tax bracket. And the solution to this, to divide and conquer, is to come together. And that is very much easier said than done for a lot of us. You know, we need to be able to come together and build community across the state on the ground. We need to build permanently organized communities so that we can withstand propaganda, so that we can withstand political and economic divide and conquer schemes, because they're always going to keep coming, because people profit off of them. And we need to have relationships across the state on the ground. We need to be able to force the encounter with each other. We need to be able to talk to our enemies. We need to be able to forge unlikely alliances, because we have to accept the reality that nobody is going anywhere. Nobody's moving away. We're all here together. These are our neighbors. We have to get along with each other. We have to love our neighbors. So I really thought I'm just going to post these into the chat here. I thought I'd bring to this event tonight a couple of guidelines for how to do this, because I know this is very much easier said than done. And so these are some guidelines from a group called Encounter, which I've worked with in the past. They bring Israelis and Palestinians together. They bring Jewish people and Palestinians together in the West Bank, in the Middle East, in order to meet each other, in order to encounter each other, in order to build that permanently organized community to actually build peace. And so I'm going to post these in the chat, but I just want to run through a few of them very quickly. One is just
make it short because we're good.
Absolutely. We have to speak for ourselves, not for groups, not for the worst leaders amongst us. We can't be defending the worst amongst us. We have to be speaking for ourselves. And I'm going to post the rest in the chat, but we have to do democracy, and that takes tactics, that takes training. It's tough.
Well, thank you for that quick from all of you. Randall, do you have that little chart I sent you today?
Here it comes.
Okay. So many of you know that the videos speak to democracy in general, and so I saw this just recently, and I thought I'd put it up there. It's in this part that has to do with democracy nationally and in Pennsylvania. And the Congress is talking about nationally passing H.R. 1, and this video or this chart shows that it's extremely popular. Many of these things, vote by mail, automatic voter registration, and 15-day early voting, and on and on and on. This will be part of what we will post on the websites. So it isn't going to be a big thing right now, but I did want to just show it to everybody, and you can check it out later. As I understand it, the House of Representatives is voting soon on H.R. 1, and hopefully the Senate will vote on it and it passes, and these things will happen nationally. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Randall. So now we'd like to move on with this discussion to a little more local in Pennsylvania. What could democracy and what should democracy look like in Pennsylvania? What actions can we take in support of these efforts? For that, we're asking each panelist to talk about what their organizations are working on, up to 8 minutes or so. And Nancy Weston is going to let me know when it gets to 7. I could give people a signal that their time is getting there, so we can stay on time schedule as we go along and have a chance for questions and answers at the end. If people have questions as we go along, they can put them in the chat session, and Reverend Joan will field those and ask them a little later. So Khalif, I was thinking maybe you could go first. I think you mentioned that you have something you have to sign off later. So if you want to go now. Talk about Common Cause of Pennsylvania and some of the.
I'm sorry, I was muted. So I'm trying to clarify for the presenters, the 1 minute signal will be in the chat.
Yes.
And the 8 minute signal will be mute.
Okay, Khalif.
Okay, so I brought a few slides, so I'll try not to take up too much time here. So I work with Common Cause Pennsylvania. So we're a part of Common Cause Education Fund, which is a national organization based in Washington, D.C. We have staff in exactly 30 states. And I happen to be the executive director of Common Cause Pennsylvania. Now, the focus of our work is really around working with individuals like yourself and organizations on the panel to grow, and we can talk a little bit about that, and strengthen democracy in a way that helps it work for everyone. Okay, so when we look at democracy, I'm glad we had that brief discussion around democracy. When we look at democracy, you know, I talked a little bit about values and how values become pillars, and those pillars become the anchors for the way that you choose to practice democracy. The problem is that we don't have great universal value or great universal pillars that apply to everyone. So something that we took a look at Common Cause Pennsylvania are these 4 pillars of democracy. Now, these aren't original. These are taken from a political scientist named Larry Diamond, who works out at Stanford, and he sort of looks at democracies throughout the world. You know, for us, we wanted to take a look internally at our own democracy and see how it sort of matches up to these pillars, right? So I'm just going to go through them real quickly, not spend too much time. Political system we're choosing, replacing the government through free and fair elections. That's straightforward. Active participation of people as citizens in politics and civic life. So, you know, one of my big things is there's great power in the fact that we're able to come together and have these conversations, but the greater power comes in the conversations that happen after these webinars and with other people associated with, you know, other people that we tend to talk to. Protection of the human rights of all citizens. We have, you know, as citizens of this country, we have a right to define ourselves how we choose. However we choose to define ourselves, however we choose to identify, that's okay. And we have a right to be protected within that identity, within that definition. And the last one is straightforward as well. The rule of the law has to apply equally to everyone. You know, because of your status, you cannot be excused from your behavior. And and we can go into that too as well. We know there's a general understanding for that. So what I want to talk to you about is Act 77, which is the Pennsylvania Election Code. You know, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing and a few other priorities that we have. So with regard to Act 77, it's the Pennsylvania Election Code. It hasn't been changed since 1937. You know, it was a bipartisan bill. There was huge support from both sides of the aisle initially to change it because it was so. It was in 1937. Signed into law by Governor Wolf in 2019. Okay, so here's a few things that we need to know about Act 77. No excuse mail-in voting, 50-day. No excuse mail-in voting was. Prior to that, we know that there had to be a legitimate reason for you to get a ballot for vote by mail or absentee ballots. 50-day mail-in voting period, 50 days prior to the election date, you can begin the process of registering and actually voting through vote by mail. Permanent mail-in and absentee ballot lists, you know, I don't know if permanent is a great term for it, but once you register to vote by mail, you can check your box and say that you would like to do that for the remainder of the year, and you're supposed to get your ballot for the next election without having to apply again. 15 more days to register to vote. Prior to this, the registration deadline was 30 days prior to the election date. Now it's 15. Extends mail-in and absentee submission deadline. So before this law, I believe the deadline was the Friday before the election at 5 o'clock, close of business. And now it's the day of at 8 o'clock in terms of vote by mail. So what ended up, what were some of the things that happened as a result of this? When we take a look at the elections in November, we see that we had 9 million registered voters, 4.2 million ballots cast in person, 2.6 million mail and absentee ballots cast. So we had an unprecedented amount of participation in the election based on the fact that there was greater opportunities for access, more opportunities for people to vote, fewer barriers, and people responded accordingly. You know, in my mind, I always felt this: the more barriers we remove to the practice of democracy, the more active that you begin to see people become. And this is something that we want to maintain. This is something that, why wouldn't we want to maintain 76 or 77% of registered voters actually voting? So what are our expectations as a result of this unprecedented turnout, right? So there was, as a result of the turnout, there was a result that wasn't satisfying to everyone, right? Not everyone was happy with the outcome of the election. And because of that, because of not feeling great about the outcome of the election in terms of President Trump losing, people wanted to question the validity of that election and blame these expanded opportunities, this expanded access for voting as a part of this irregularities, voting fraud, all of these various conspiracy theories around the validity of the election. So what I listed here are some of the responses that we're seeing as a result of the elections. Now, HB 38, which Kadida will dig into much better than I can, is in my mind, in our minds, a direct response to the decisions that were rendered for all of the lawsuits that were brought before, during, and after the election by the Republican Party, all of which were dismissed without merit. And HB 38 is designed specifically, as it reads, to punish the appellate courts of Pennsylvania, our three highest courts, Superior, Commonwealth, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So this is to teach them a lesson about not rendering decisions that were favorable during and after the election, even before in some cases. So what we're seeing now is Representative Seth Grove of York is holding, some of which have already occurred, these 14 legislative hearings on the actual election. And what these hearings are doing is setting a stage for the rollback of many of the voting reforms that we see happening in Act 77. So this is a staging here, you know. The next hearing coming up, I think, is on March 3rd. They're not bringing in the interim Secretary of State for Pennsylvania. They're bringing in the Secretary of State from Ohio, who is a clear opponent against to voting by mail. So this is really, like I said, this is the staging for what we see below that, which are the voting restriction laws that will be coming, that will begin to roll out. There will be voter ID laws. There will be attempt to eliminate voting by mail. Now, I'm not saying any of these will pass, but you know, there's a staging that happens that lays a basis or a foundation for the policies that we're going to see soon. So voter ID laws, elimination of voting by mail, removal of drop boxes, signature verification. These are all things that are going to provide election security to eliminate the irregularities that they believed occurred during the presidential elections of 2020. So this is the philosophy. I'm sorry.
Finish up.
Okay. So this is the thought behind these laws. These policies, these bills that will be coming up. So I want to wrap it up there, and I have to go, unfortunately, and I apologize, but here's my contact information, kle@commoncause.org. Please feel free to email me. I'll answer questions. I'm not great with email. It might take me a little time, but trust me, I will get to you. Also, feel free to sign up for updates on the policies and the additional work that we'll be doing at commoncause.org. You can go to the state, or you go commoncause.org/Pennsylvania. So with that, thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to maybe coming back and talking a little bit. I know you wanted me to talk about risk limiting audits. I'd like to come back and just talk about that without anything else. That's a separate entity itself.
We'll be doing this again. Thank you,
Okay.
Khalif.
Yes, thank you.
Kadida, did you want to follow up and talk about House Bill 38? And since he brought that up a little bit.
Sure, I have that within my presentation. Do you want me to go on now?
Go ahead.
All right, let me pull up my PowerPoint presentation. Hello, everybody. Good to see your faces. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Let me get rid of this last one I was sharing here for Randall. All right. Can someone just tell me they see this okay, since I share my screen a couple times?
I can see that, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna start my 8-minute timer here, Tom.
Okay, well,
I have to get
good.
through here, but I'm gonna see if I can do it.
All righty, thank you.
So many of you may know me from doing the Why Courts Matter presentations across the state. Prior to our global pandemic here, I was in UU churches across the state, from Pittsburgh area, Montgomery County, Harrisburg, Reading. So very happy to be with the UUs tonight. You're one of my favorite groups to speak with and try to bring these issues to light. And so Why Courts Matter, we initially started off talking about the federal courts and the importance of the federal courts, but we've branched out into the state courts as well, because our state courts are so much in this current light under attack. And I don't need to go through all of this history lesson with you, I don't think, at this moment, and go back to Civics 101 with you. But we know that we have levels to our courts here in Pennsylvania. And I want to speak specifically to our appellate court level, so that common pleas, superior court, Supreme Court level this evening. And so I want to just show you a quick couple pictures here. This is our Commonwealth Court. These are the judges who currently sit on our Commonwealth Court, which is a uniquely Pennsylvanian appellate court here in the state intermediate level. We elect these judges statewide currently. We all know that. We elect these judges statewide for a 10-year term. But I want to kind of humanize what these courts do for us, because as we have with democracy, we have this abstract affinity for it. We have one for the judiciary as well. And so here's a case that was heard by the Commonwealth Court. It's going to be heard probably by the Supreme Court very soon. And if you think back to just 2 years ago, when we were at the ballot box, we had an opportunity to vote on the Marsy's Law bill, the crimes victim bill. And if you remember that correctly, the Pennsylvanians, like we typically do, we all voted for the most part yes on these ballot referendum questions. Marsy's Law was one of those questions that we voted yes on. And so this is a Philadelphia resident named Lorraine Hall, and she's the plaintiff in the 2019 lawsuit against that ballot question of Marsy's Law. She's someone who's actually suffered through the criminal justice system herself, lost a brother and a son to crime. But on January 7th of just this year, the Commonwealth Court ruled that Marsy's Law was unconstitutional and invalidated our referendum votes. And so that's probably going to reach the Supreme Court very soon. So I just wanted to give you some backdrop information on that, and kind of a case that's heard by the Commonwealth Court. And then here's the Supreme Court, it's the oldest appellate court in the United States. Again, we elect these judges on a statewide election. This is the court that's pretty much under attack right now. And groups such as Common Cause and League of Women Voters, we came together back in 2018 to stop the attacks on the Supreme Court. Here's an example of a case that was heard by the Supreme Court very recently. We all may be able to commiserate with this. Kiara Tucker out of Delaware County, she was unable to get her mail-in ballot in time to use it to vote that way in the general election. So she does what we tell everyone to do, not leave the poll without voting provisionally. So she did that. Well, she voted with the provisional ballot, and she got a letter in the mail, letter telling her that her vote was being challenged. And so because the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania rejected these attempts to contest these provisional ballots, her voice was heard. So this is an example of cases that are heard by these appellate courts and why it's so important that we protect those courts. So here we are coming out now almost of Black History Month. And so I wanted to present something to you all because I'm somewhat of a history buff myself. I enjoyed to talk about the historical perspective of things that are happening today here in 2021. And if you look at this picture, maybe some of you have some recollection of this. This was U.S. Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren. He was in the 50s overturning lots of Jim Crow, one of those cases being Brown versus Board of Education. And because he was overturning some, statutes, some laws that some folks were unhappy about, they wanted to impeach U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren. Billboards across the South and other places. You can see this picture here. You have the Confederate flag on the left and the American flag on the right. And organizations such as the John Birch Society and others wanted to impeach Justice Earl Warren for the decisions that were coming out of that court that they didn't agree with. That's something that would happen, right? Well, that same thing was pretty similar here in Pennsylvania. We had some legislators who were very upset about the ruling that came out of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, that decision to make sure that we don't have gerrymandered maps here in the state of Pennsylvania. And so what did they want to do on February 6th of 2018? We had a state representative who's now a state senator put forth a memo to impeach our Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices right out of the playbook that you just saw previously. And so what we're finding, you know, as our democracy seems to be under attack here in Pennsylvania, is that we have legislators who are trying to usurp their authority. And when they're not happy with decisions that are coming out of the courts, if they can't impeach them, they try to do the next best thing, which would be to gerrymander our judiciary. So I want to show you a quick video here so you can get an idea, just in case you haven't seen this before, of what that is.
Hey, Pennsylvania. You know how we've been fighting gerrymandering, where politicians draw legislative maps that give them an unfair advantage and take away democratic power from voters? Well, those same politicians want to do the same thing to our judicial elections. Judicial gerrymandering changes how we elect judges to our state's highest courts, including the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We elect judges statewide today. A proposed constitutional amendment would give legislators the power to create districts to elect judges. And just as they gerrymander legislative maps to favor their preferred candidates, legislators would do that with judicial districts as well. So why is this so bad? It's pretty simple. Judicial districts are a solution in search of a problem. Look at our judges and justices, and you will see that they are from all over the state. But electing judges in districts could make it more difficult to put the best qualified judges on the bench in particular elections in the future. We want the best qualified candidates from the state to be judges in our courts, no matter where they are from. There is no Montgomery County or Elk County way to interpret statutes and the Pennsylvania Constitution. Most importantly, electing judges in legislator-drawn districts would undermine the independence of the courts and the separation of powers. Allowing legislators to influence who gets on our courts would enable them to influence the decisions they make, undermining the checks and balances so critical to our Constitution. Our appellate courts make major decisions regarding civil liberties and rights, educational funding, environmental protection, and gerrymandering itself. We must protect the independence of our courts.
All right. So, you know, there's a lot more to say about this. I don't have a lot of time, so hopefully when we get to the question and answer, maybe I can bring up some more of this information to you. But we do need to protect the independence of our judiciary. We need for us to ensure that we have courts and judges who are impartial, ethical, fairly selected, transparent, evaluated and monitored, resourced, and that there's discretion that they're able. We don't want to see maps like this, right? The 2011 congressional map. We don't want to see this in our judiciary. We already know that our legislators have a hard time drawing maps effectively for us. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share here. And, you know, I just want to remind folks, you know, as we talk about democracy and why, what we want in our democracy, we want democracy reforms. And House Bill 38 is not a pro-democracy reform. It's an attempt to suppress our votes. It's an attempt to disenfranchise us here in Pennsylvania. And we are the testing ground. If they can do that to us in Pennsylvania, other states across the country are going to do the same thing. So we had to stop it here in Pennsylvania so it doesn't go countrywide. So the power is with the people, right? We have the power. We're much stronger, and we're much stronger than the people temporarily in power. So keep fighting for our democracy.
Thank you, Kadida. Carol.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And I'm in the wrong place. I'm going to have to unshare my screen for just a second. Sorry about that. I thought I was in the right spot.
Take your time.
Well, I'm using my time. I know there's a clock ticking on me.
We'll compensate, Carol.
Okay. So here I go. So thank you for having me. I think we've been in a place where we've seen some monsters eating our democracy, and I like this. I don't like what this cartoon says, but I think it says it well, that we've created some monsters and those monsters have done real harm. And this particular monster is gerrymandering, and it has kind of gobbled up our democracy and left us in a bit of a shambled space. And so we are working hard to put in place a better redistricting guidelines And what we are very aware of is the next year will shape Pennsylvania's maps and our politics and our policy for the next decade and beyond. The maps we've had for the last 30 years have been really gerrymandered, and the last decade was terrible and has put people into very safe districts where they've been free to ignore the people completely, and we need to change that. So we were working very, very hard to put in place an independent citizens redistricting commission, and got lots of signatures, did lots of polls. Many of you were involved in lots of this, getting resolutions in support, writing letters to the editor, a huge amount of public work. The bills we supported had more co-sponsors than any other in the last two sessions, and in the 2018 session had more than a majority of the House co-sponsoring the bills, and yet did not get a final vote. And what we saw is that the voice of the people doesn't matter. To our state legislature, the way it's set up, the voices don't count. We had a really big rally in 2018. We had an even larger rally planned for last March, and just 2 weeks before the rally realized the pandemic was coming our way and had to cancel that rally. We have legislators who said, there was great momentum, and that they thought we might have gotten our bills passed if it weren't for the pandemic. But the pandemic really shut things down and then allowed a lot of really divisive narrative to take place in our Capitol. A lot of pushing back on the governor, a lot of ignoring of the good work that had been done by lots of citizen groups on some important issues. All of that was ignored. And so in this past session, the supported bills were never given a final vote. What we've learned in the 5 years since starting Fair Districts PA is that there's a tight knot of dysfunction in our state legislature. The leaders draw the districts, then distorted districts protect incumbents, and then the leaders control the rules, and the leaders have leadership in part because of their seniority, because they're in safe districts, and then they have rules that allow them to block reform. And then because there's blocked reform, and the leaders are the ones who continue to draw the districts, and we have this kind of continuing cycle of dysfunction. And so the question for all of us is, how do we break that? How does the voice of the people get heard in a system that has so tightly closed us out? And so that's what we're trying to do. We've been doing some research on agenda fairness in state legislatures, and what we've discovered is that there are legislatures that have a lot of processes in place that allow votes to move quickly. A bill gets introduced, it gets a vote. If it comes out of one chamber, it gets a vote in the other chamber. Pennsylvania has none of those practices in place that would allow bills to get a fair vote, which means things like our redistricting reform bills, which had a lot of bipartisan support, can be blocked by one chairperson. One person can say, we're not going to give that a vote, or one leader can say, we're not interested, and those bills can be blocked. Or something like the judicial district bill can go flying through, even though there's no visible public support at all, none, zero. And Kadida did a great job of explaining that bill. I'm not going to talk about that. I just want to talk about the process. You can't find the transcript of the House Judiciary Committee meeting where that bill was voted on. And I did find the live stream of the 9-minute Senate State Government Committee meeting. It's no longer on the website, but we did record it before they took it down. So we have a recording of 9 minutes in our Senate State Government Committee where the bill is introduced. There's one question about, if this is about diversity, why are we thinking about regional diversity and not looking at racial diversity? Not really answered. There's one senator who reads comments from the bar associations describing what a bad bill it is, no response, and then a vote. 9 minutes on a constitutional amendment. Incredible. So it passed with no expert testimony, no public input, no cross-partisan support of any kind. And we were concerned for lots of reasons, but one is that there's no safeguards against partisan gerrymandering. But the question is, who supported this bill and who decided it would move so quickly without anything that looked remotely like due process? No transparency, no accountability, and no representation from the people at all. In this session, the new bill, the same bill, but a new number, House Bill 38, was announced, the vote on it was announced less than 24 hours before the vote took place. And you can't file an amendment. If you're going to file an amendment to a bill, it has to be more than 24 hours before. So it was announced inside of the window of being allowed to file an amendment, completely opposed to good process. And I think the goal was obviously to pass it through quickly before anybody noticed and then go to the primary ballot. Fortunately, there were lots of folks, lots of organizations paying attention, ready to speak out. And there was an outcry, which caught our legislators off guard. I think they really, they just kind of assumed they could just push things along and no one's going to notice. And this time people did notice. So that bill has been tabled for now. There were more than 100 organizations speaking out against it, lots of op-eds, lots of calls and letters. We're trying to focus on the process and say, wouldn't it make sense to invite public comment before a vote like that on a bill of that importance? So it's a bad bill, really bad process. And the bad process is held in place by an unaccountable legislature, which is held in place by gerrymandering. So what's next in all of this? We're trying to call attention to better procedural rules, and we've been able to kind of push some conversations about rules in both chambers. And there are legislators who are talking about this behind the scenes, about what would it take to have better rules in place so that good bills would get a vote and bad bills would not. We're also obviously very concerned about redistricting. For congressional redistricting, right now there's a balance of power. The Republicans control House and Senate. The governor is a Democrat, and he is not going to sign off on a bill that gives power to the Republicans. They're not going to draw a map that gives power to the Democrats. So we're kind of assuming we're going to get a fairly reasonable congressional map. What happens with the legislative map? These are the 5 guys that drew the map in 2011. It's possible that this year we might actually have women on that commission. It's not guaranteed, but the Senate Majority Leader is a woman, the House Minority Leader is a woman of color. It would be wonderful to have a more diverse commission, although we've heard some rumors that some of these leaders are going to have somebody else take their place. So it might not be the people that we were hoping that it would be. The 5th person will be chosen by the majority. Either the 4 will agree, which has not happened yet since this provision was put in place. If they don't agree on the 5th person will be chosen by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and that will likely be a Democrat. We've been working really hard to get this bill introduced that would put guardrails around the process and provide for more transparency and public input. That would require that all data used would be available to the public. That would require that the public be able to submit maps, be able to do analytics on maps, be able to offer comment on maps, and put some guidelines about not dividing precincts, not dividing counties more than numerically necessary, protecting communities of interest, observing geographic boundaries. So it's a bill that has quite a lot in it about how the maps would be drawn and what the outcome should be of the maps without changing who does it, because we don't have time any longer to change who does it. So those bills were just actually on the General Assembly website today. They finally are on there. House Bill 22 and Senate Bill 222. They've been in process for a little bit, but now they are officially introduced. And we'll be pushing those. Timeline for redistricting. This is a bit scrambled because of the delay in the census. So it gives in some ways time to really call attention to the process, but also is going to, we know there's going to be some attempt to push back the new maps until the next round of elections. We're going to be speaking out really strongly to say, we need new maps for 2022. We're not going to put up with the old maps for another 2 years. Those old maps are very gerrymandered. We know we have to have new maps for the congressional districts because we're going to lose a seat, and you can't have 18 people in 17 seats. So those are going to have to be redrawn. But our argument is that they all need to be redrawn in time for 2022. So the deadline was supposed to be, we were already supposed to know how many seats we have, the reapportionment. That's now going to be March 31st. The data is supposed to be to the states by April 1st. What we're hearing now is that's going to be September 30th. There is no September 31st, so September 30th.
Okay, Carol.
Yeah. Am I done?
Finish up.
Okay, I'm finishing up. So we're pushing this bill. We're going to be doing public mapping, analysis of maps. And also we have some events coming up on Wednesday. In March, we're going to try to meet with all of our legislators. We're going to have a town hall to learn about advocacy and how to advocate for these bills. We're going to be doing some prison gerrymandering events, regional events. We'd love to have folks be involved in those. we're going to have a day of action on April 29th. So we've got plenty of stuff coming up. I'll put some of that in the chat so you can sign up and see what's coming.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Carol. Rabbi Michael Pollack, March on Harrisburg.
March on. So the system is not broken, it's actually fixed. And it can be. The good news is that we have the policy solutions and the policy tools to fix it so that it isn't fixed and so that it actually represents the people. So in addition to some of the policies that have already been presented by the other incredible speakers on this panel, I'm going to share my screen with you all in a second and walk you through some more policies that will do great wonders. Also, like Kadida, please do not judge me for my tabs. So, one policy is called democracy dollars. This policy only exists in the United States of America in Seattle right now. South Dakota passed it by ballot initiative and referendum, but their legislature vetoed it, and that story is not yet over. But democracy dollars are something we're trying to push in Pennsylvania and bring to the Commonwealth. What happens is instead of politicians going to, let's say, the Waldorf Astoria in New York City every December to beg rich people for money or dialing for dollars most of their campaign time, or going to Chicago or LA or Houston or Oklahoma City or wherever the money is and begging rich people for money, instead what they can do is actually talk to their voters, talk to their constituents, talk to their real constituents, not their cash constituents, and get support and actually interact with their people. And so what Democracy Dollars does is it says that everybody who agrees to participate accepts certain limitations like campaign finance limits. Right now in Pennsylvania, we have 0 campaign finance limits for our state government. You can cut a $1 million check to your favorite state representative. In fact, if you do, they'll pick up the phone anytime you call. I can guarantee that. Once you're in the program, so residents all get democracy dollars in the mail. In Seattle, that looks like 4 $25 vouchers. They can then give them to candidates of their choice that they can also vote for. So you can't give one to somebody running on the other side of the state. You can only give them to the ones that are on your ballot. And then the candidates redeem those vouchers for money, for funds, for public funds that they use to run their campaigns. And this way, with public campaign financing, candidates don't beg rich people for money. They actually talk to the people who they're supposed to be talking with. It's a very novel idea. And we need this. With publicly funded elections, what happens is, first off, you get an explosion of diversity in candidates. You get people running for office who never were able to run for office before for whatever reasons, people who don't have access to money, people who are working 1 or 2 jobs, people who weren't born with wealth, have access to funds to actually run a campaign. In Maine, with their public campaign financing system, a single mother and a waitress named Deb Simpson was able to run for office, get elected, and retire as one of the most beloved state senators in Maine's history. It opens the door to people who don't have access to the table. It increases the number of candidates. You don't have elections that are unopposed. People are incentivized to run. They don't have to beg for money. They don't have to burn through their savings. They can actually run honest campaigns. And it builds trust because we all see where our politicians are spending their time. U.S. congressmen spend between 30 and 70% of their time begging for money, dialing for dollars. And when they're doing that, they're responding to the money. They lean toward the green. They lean in the direction of whatever the big money is telling them to do. And it stifles our system. It's corruption. It's bribery, plain and simple. And so to overcome the trust gap that Francis Moore Lepay was talking about earlier, we need to go after the money. We need to go to the root of the evil. Another money in politics bill here is the gift ban. So the gift ban is astounding that we even need this. In Pennsylvania, it's still completely legal to gift anything to any state public official. You can give your state senator a $1 million car. If they even make cars that expensive, I have no idea. You can give them something of value. You can give them anything that they want. You can give that. You can pay their kids private school tuition payments. You can take them to the Bahamas. You can take them to the Super Bowl. You can take them to a Beyonce concert. You can take them to Hershey Park. Wherever you want to take them, you can take them. Whatever they want, you can fulfill that dream with money, with gifts, with bribery. And so right now, the gift ban, it passed out of the House State Government Committee last fall, the fall of 2019. And then it was on the caucus calendar in the House when the pandemic began, and they scrapped it. They threw it away. But we have the support of the committee chairman in the House. We have the support of the House Majority Leader, of the Speaker of the House, of the governor, and of the previous 2 Senate State Government Committee chairs, but they keep turning over. There's just a lot of turnover in that building. I feel like everybody that the people on this panel that we deal with, they just disappear quickly. They just keep, I'm trying not to take it personally, but we're still pushing the gift ban, and we're hopeful to get that moving in committee as soon as they finish up their election hearings. So in mid-April, we hope to have a bill introduced from the majority party that should move pretty quickly. Also, you may say, well, we have transparency. Well, sort of. As you can see here, the amount that legislators report versus the amount that lobbyists report giving is quite different. So the transparency even is really nothing. And also this number that lobbyists report giving, we know that that number is also low because of how that system is set up. It's bribery, plain and simple. Another thing that we need to address is how we actually vote for our candidates. We've been doing elections all wrong in this country. We vote for our favorite candidate, and the person who gets the most votes wins, even if they don't get a majority. Think of Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential primary. He never got a majority of votes. Think of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who won a congressional primary against 9 other opponents without a majority of votes. This allows for people to divide and conquer our elections and run away with the seats. So we need to move to a majority voting system. And what ranked choice voting does is it allows you to rank the candidates on your ballot, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many there are, however many you want to rank. And if no candidate wins a majority, then the candidate who received the fewest votes is eliminated, and the votes that had been cast for the eliminated candidate are instantly recast for their second choice. And this process goes until somebody has the majority. And so what that means is you can't negative campaign. You can't be a jerk in the room going, everybody else sucks, vote for me, I'm your only hope, I'm your only savior. Because if 70% of the electorate can't stand your guts, you're not going to be able to win with a 30% plurality, not a majority. It ensures majority support. It makes it so that everybody at least approves of the candidates that ended up winning. It minimizes lesser of two evils voting. There's no more of that, oh, I can't vote for the Green Party because my vote's going to be wasted. It's not. There's no more wasted votes. It increases representation of people of color. It increases representation of women. It allows for consensus candidates to come together. And just a quick word here at the end, all of these policies mean absolutely nothing if we can't fight and win, right? All of these policies that we've talked about tonight mean absolutely nothing if we cannot organize, educate, and mobilize the people power necessary to make the politicians respond to the people and not to big money interests and not to hyper-partisan concerns. So we have the policy solutions. In fact, as a movement, we've had them for years. What we don't have yet is the people power. What we don't have yet is the organized people willing to show up at the Capitol and make a difference and demand change.
Thank you. Michael. Reverend Joan, did you want to pick out a couple questions as we move forward?
There are not a lot of questions, a lot of comments, but not too many questions. But let me begin by, I wanted everybody on the call tonight to know that there was a significant number of Republican legislators in Pennsylvania who voted not to certify the PA election, and then they wrote a letter to the United States Congress asking them not to certify the Pennsylvania election. And I'm not talking 5 people, I'm talking over 70. So the UUJusticePA board, with the initiation of one of our members, Reverend Terry Cummings from the York congregation, composed a letter letting them know that we disapprove of their action. We will talk against them and talk against their action when we can. And we haven't sent it yet. We're trying to get some supporters. MarchOnHarrisburg is supporting, and both. I don't know where Carol, League of Women Voters is, and we don't need to talk about it now. But we don't take us an hour. But I've sent it out to everybody and some other partners that we UUJusticePA work with in the election cycle. The UU the vote folks. Trying to get some more people, more organizations means more power, right? So I hope we'll be sending that off to them. And if it ends up being just us, that's fine too. But we think it's important. So I'm going to go back to the chat. Will this recording be sent to participants? I missed it. It will be on our website. It'll be on our YouTube channel, and there'll be a link there on our website. So go to UUJusticePA.org and you'll be able to link to it. Is merit choice judges a good idea? Carol?
Yes.
Carol, you want to respond?
Yes, League of Women Voters has supported merit selection of judges since 1949. States started moving towards that a little bit before that. It really depends on the bill. It depends on how it's set up. But if you have a really good independent commission vetting them, and if you look for, so you could set up rules so that they're looking for diversity among the judges in terms of kind of background. So right now we end up with lots of corporate judges in our higher courts. You could set it up so that they are deliberately nominating people who have had a different, been public defenders or civil rights lawyers. I mean, there's lots of ways to create a more balanced judiciary. If you have a commission that's doing the vetting on those judges and then a selection process and affirming them, we could end up with a really different kind of court that would be far more removed from any kind of partisan influence of. Right now, we've got a lot of outside money being spent on our judicial races. Merit selection would go a long way. And we've had judges from every party and every background say it would be a real benefit to the state of Pennsylvania to get away from our partisan election of judges and move to a good merit selection process.
Thank you. Thank
If I
you.
can jump in
Michael,
also-
I'm sorry, Kadida, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Question too, because there's definitely folks feel different ways. Part of the JIPA table, the Judicial Independence Project of Pennsylvania, we had more than 125 organizations. We called it a table and not a coalition because not all of us agreed on how, judges should be elected. Should they be merit selection or should they be elected? Like we are one of only 8 states in the country that still does that. I can tell you, we did have folks at the table like Pennsylvanians from Modern Courts, totally in favor of merit selection. Organizations like the ACLU of Pennsylvania, not in favor of merit selection. Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, we have taken no position. But what I wanted to mention about that is currently, while we are still electing our judges, and we're allowed to elect 31 appellate court judges, we should be able to vote for all 31, not the 3 that Russ Diamond out of Lebanon County believes that we're allowed to. So while we're still voting for the judges as it is right now, I want to be able to vote for all 31 appellate court judges, not just 3.
Totally agree with that, totally. So, Rabbi Michael, this is for you. I am cynical about democracy dollars, Rabbi Pollack. Couldn't the wealthy folks pay to collect people's DD?
No, is the simplest answer, because that would be illegal within the bill. So in Seattle, the way that they've set it up is you can only spend your campaign money to employ people to go out and collect these things. But the campaign money that you can generate in order to pay people to collect vouchers is limited by the law. So you can't just take $1 billion and hire 10,000 people to fan out and take everybody's vouchers. There are limits on that. I'd also like to just go back to this discussion on merit-based selection. This is Speaker Cutler's dream. This is something that he's always been in favor of, that he's been pushing his entire time in office. And he's doing it. I think it's important for us to understand his motives, because they're fascinating to me, to be honest. The first thing I asked him one time was, what would you do if you had a magic wand and you could change anything? And he said merit-based selection because of judicial corruption. And I said, what does that mean, judicial corruption? And he said, in 2015, the Democrats spent $18 million to take the state Supreme Court, and they did it. And I said, aren't you a libertarian? Isn't this, freedom of speech to be able to throw as much money as you want, at an election? This is your freedom of speech. And he said, no, this is corruption, plain and simple, period. This is corruption. So there is room to work with these people on some of these corruption issues. And we have to be open to these conversations.
Lily, I saw your question, but I think it got answered by Nancy Weston. It was WITF, the public radio station in Harrisburg, that published the article listing each of those 70 legislators in Pennsylvania who refused to certify, and then wrote the letter, which is even more egregious to me, wrote the letter to Congress asking them not to certify. So that's public record, WITF radio. If you can't find it, send me an email. I'll send it to you. Nancy's asking when we did a March on Harrisburg, I think this is nonviolent action in May 2019, the Capitol Police arrested us. We were calling attention to the gift ban, told us they can't even be given a cup of coffee and a donut legally. I think that was after Wolf put out that, well, I'm not taking, and no one's taking any money from the lobbyists anymore. Does anyone want to speak to that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, oh, that was a fun day.
Yeah, it was
I
great.
guess I'll speak to that.
And following, not only the day, but go ahead.
Yeah, so Governor Wolf, when he came into office, put a gift ban over himself and his office, but that does not extend to any other branch of the government. So Capitol police officer, you can't bribe them, right? And that's a good thing. You can't go up to a police officer with, a briefcase full of cash. You can't do that legally, and that's a very good thing. And you shouldn't be able to do that to a legislator either. And one thing about that action and a lot of the actions we do is the importance of creativity. Right? I said earlier, we have the policy solutions. We have the ideas. They're out there. What we need is the people power, waging creative, effective tactics in order to push politicians to do the things that they frankly don't want to do. And one of the guiding ideas behind some of our actions is the Passover is coming up in 1 month. If I may preach for a second, Passover is coming up in 1 month. And Passover tells the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And in that story, there are the 10 plagues. And the first plague is the water turns to blood. The Nile River turns to blood. And the rabbis ask the question, why is that the first plague? And it's because the Egyptian society and Pharaoh worshipped the Nile River. That was their idol. That was their god. And so the rabbis teach that when you smash the idols, the priests who prop up the idols are embarrassed. They get abashed. When the idols are smashed, the priests are abashed. And a lot of our direct actions are aiming at smashing the idols and showing the ridiculousness of the high priests, showing the ridiculousness, the absurdity of the legislators in charge, of the people who call themselves our leaders. And so in that 2019 action, we threw $500 cash down on the House floor from the House gallery to make the point that when money talks, people can't talk. We took a giant swing at the idol of money, the idol of greed, the idol of power, and we showed the ridiculousness that of us throwing $500 cash down on the House floor in contrast to these legislators running away to New York City to beg for money.
Thank you, Michael.
How to get one Bible story in there, Michael.
Absolutely.
Your job.
And we're getting near the end, Joan, and let me just quickly ask each of the three participants that are here, what should an individual do? I mean, I think each person on the call, on the program, should think about getting on Fair Districts PA email list, and the same with Budget and Policy Center or Why Courts Matter with Kadida, and the same with March on Harrisburg. And then you hear on a regular basis what's happening as we go along. Anything else, Carol?
Yeah, we are in the month of March trying to meet with every single legislator in the state, because some legislators say, oh, no one in my district cares about this. And we are in every district and we want to show up in every district. So we've got I put the link in the chat to sign up to meet a legislator, your own legislator, this month. We're trying to meet with every legislator in the state this month to say, your constituents do care about maps and we want fair maps. And then we're going to be doing actions across the state in April, just across the state to say, we're here, we're across the entire state. We're not, one group of people or another. We're just Pennsylvania citizens who want to see fair maps and we want to be represented fairly. So yes, get on our email list, and then you'll get our emails, and then you'll be able to sign up for things easily.
Kadida.
Thanks, Carol.
Absolutely. So I dropped some links there in the chat box. If you go to the JIPA website, you'll get contact information for myself, also for Khalif and Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. I just want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. You see the gentleman behind my shoulder here, Baird Rustin, in the Quaker tradition. He was able to organize the March on Washington in 1963 for jobs and freedom. He did that without the internet. He did it without email. He did it without Facebook or Instagram. And so we just need to be in that same vein here in 2021. We have to organize and we have to demand the things we want and make this democracy work for us. And that happens by lobbying your legislators. A groundswell of public opinion. You get 3-4 people to talk about the same issue in the same day on the phone, or if you're able to get into the district offices, it creates a groundswell of public opinion. These legislators work for us. They must remember that. We must remind them of that. And they care about what we tell them to care about. So if you care about raising the minimum wage, if you care about housing, if you care about fair funding for education, all the things we talk about here at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, please make your voices heard. They're counting on us to fall asleep. A lot of us woke up in 2016. They're counting on us to fall asleep after the results of 2020's election. We could not allow them to catch us sleeping. That's what they tried to do with House Bill 38. We can't let them do that any further.
Thank you. Rabbi Michael Pollack.
Put some links into the, put a link into the chat here. Go to mohpa.org/events. Join the closest chapter to you. Get organized. Get active. I just want to appreciate Bayard Rustin for a second as well, and just say that I think the most underrated and underappreciated action of the entire march in Washington was Bayard Rustin getting 50,000 cheese sandwiches from New York City down to DC. That's the kind of, there's space in the movement for everyone. Everybody can help. We all just need to be organized, get active, and change the democracy.
And just so everyone knows, I copied all of those links. I think I have them all already, but just in case I have them all, we'll put them up on our website and on our team pages as soon as we can.
Thank you, Reverend Joan. And let me just thank everybody for tonight's program. Our UU Justice team, Reverend Joan, Ruth Thomas, Ruth Bowen, Carol Stowell, Liz Perkins, thank you, Randall, and Nancy Weston. Special thanks to our panelists. That was wonderful having Carol Kunihulm, Khalif Ali, Kadida Kenner, and Michael Pollack. Thank you again to everybody else for joining us. And so, as we say, now our program is over, but our activism in support of democracy continues. So good night, everybody, and thanks again for being here. We will hope to have another program soon.